All right, it's time. So let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Building Connections. My name is Rebecca Nelson, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Career Planning and Development Center at Webster University, a centralized career development office located in St. Louis, Missouri, providing individualized career development support to undergraduate and graduate students across Webster's network of campuses and online programs. Today's webinar is being recorded. A follow-up email will be sent to attendees by the end of the day tomorrow. That will include the presentation materials for our topic and also a link to the recording. So that will be sent to the email address associated with your Handshake account. Additional information in that post-webinar communication will highlight future Career Planning and Development Center events and how to schedule a career advising appointment with your designated career advisor through Handshake. To assist with the quality of our webinar, we ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the duration of the event. And if at any point you have questions about the information being discussed, feel free to use the chat box to communicate those questions or comments, and I'll reserve time at the end of our session to share those questions with our presenter. So as I mentioned before, our topic today is building connections. And during this hour, you'll learn strategies for developing and maintaining professional connections, both virtually and in person, through networking, informational interviewing, and fostering positive professional workplace relationships. Our presenter is John Holste. He is the Assistant Director for Career Development and the Career Advisor and Liaison to the College of Arts and Sciences, Leisure Dean College of Fine Arts, and the School of Communications. So a lot of people. John works individually with all of those students in a multitude of career development areas, including our featured topic today. So with that, I will hand it over to John.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you all and welcome. So I'm excited to talk to you guys today. And throughout this session, we're going to be taking a look at some different strategies for developing connections and building your professional network. So learning outcomes by the end of today's session, ideally, you will be able to become familiar with strategies for building connections, networking, and maintaining a professional network. So we'll discuss some different ways you can kind of grow your network and strategies for developing professional and industry connections. We'll also talk about how you may want to kind of maintain your network, because building a professional network is one thing, and maintaining it and keeping communication channels open is an entirely other thing, and oftentimes overlooked but necessary component involved with the process. So we'll also kind of discover the advantages involved with developing and establishing a professional network and common methods networks can be engaged. So we'll discuss why it's important and how it can be helpful for your professional growth. And then identify opportunities and strategies for establishing professional connections, both in person and technology. Obviously, COVID has kind of changed the landscape when it comes to developing professional connections in person, but we'll take a look at both meeting professionals within your field in person in the future, and then meeting other people in your field through virtual formats like LinkedIn, Handshake, industry-specific and professional association websites. We'll also determine the next steps you can take and develop an action plan. So we'll look at what those actions are that you can take immediately following this webinar, and also just kind of in the future as well. So I think it's helpful to start off by talking about kind of why professional connections are important and sort of defining that. So we'll be discussing these ideas throughout the course of today's session. So I think it's helpful to first really kind of clarify and define what these terms are when we're referencing them. So professional connections involve establishing professional working relationships with others, oftentimes within an industry or shared field of interest. So this is a kind of fairly broad term. And as you can imagine, it can involve a number of different people. Your professional connections may include people you already know, or people that you will seek to meet in the future. They may have backgrounds similar to your own, such as like classmates or other students, or they may have extensive experience in the field already. So it can kind of run the gamut in terms of experience level. And then when we talk about networking, we're talking about networking as an ongoing organic process of building mutually beneficial relationships. So let's kind of dissect the keywords here. So there's ongoing. It's a continuous process. It's not just meeting people once, but it's kind of maintaining that network, as I mentioned before. It's important to stay connected either digitally or by exchanging contact information. The other word, organic. So something that happens naturally. It can happen through meeting people at events or involvement in professional organizations. It's important to note also that that isn't to say that there aren't strategies you can implement to create these opportunities and be proactive. It doesn't necessarily, when I say organic, have to be just something that ends up happening. You can take those proactive approaches, and that's sort of the focus of what we'll be talking about today. And then mutually beneficial. So ideally, both parties may benefit from the connection. That's not always the case, though. Sometimes networking can get kind of a bad rap because it may be associated with being transactional or always involving like a quid pro quo type of exchange. It doesn't necessarily have to revolve around that idea. It can simply involve getting to know someone else in your field in a professional sense. At times that may evolve into information sharing or something that benefits both parties, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve any type of that sort of exchange. Relationship. So ultimately, it's about building a new partnership that has emerged. It's a shared experience, so there exists at least a possibility that each party can learn from each other. And it involves connecting and interacting with new individuals to form professional relationships and alliances. So it may be an opportunity to team up and join forces to achieve goals together. Again, it doesn't necessarily always have to involve that, but that is a possibility. And it can simply revolve around information sharing. So people exchanging professional ideas and information. So maybe you're both working on similar projects and just kind of talking with each other about your strategies for going about doing that. You may learn from one another. You may kind of develop or learn about different ideas of solutions that other people have implemented or found success using that you hadn't thought about before. So that's one of those potential benefits of kind of establishing that connection. And it can be helpful for learning about professional development opportunities as well. You can form new connections and alliances to learn about new opportunities. New possibilities can open up just through conversation and maintaining those connections. So maybe someone is looking to fill a position at their organization and you happen to be looking for an internship opportunity somewhere at that time. Or maybe you're interested in a specific type of training or learning about specific industry information. Or maybe that individuals you're connected with have ideas or information that could be useful to some degree. Developing and leveraging a professional network can really help contribute to professional growth opportunities. So it's not just about gaining information about a project or a company or a solution, but it can really pave the way for learning about potential job opportunities and other opportunities for potential growth. There's the idea of like the hidden job market, which I'll kind of touch on in the future, but that's sort of what another one of those helpful aspects that can be applied through networking. And then networking and professional connections can take place in in-person or digital formats. So again, it can happen pretty much anywhere. It tends to be more common at professional events or conferences or things of that nature. It can also involve social networking platforms like LinkedIn, Handshake, professional association websites, or discussion boards. Even some non-professional social networking sites have groups devoted to certain professions. So I know my spouse is actually a behavior analyst, and she is involved with a group on like Facebook that involves that. And so she gets some kind of information that way and connects with other people in her field. And while I would recommend that is a possibility, I would exercise some level of caution if you're using platforms that are not specifically designed for professional connections, because again, you want to try to remain professional at all times and that sort of thing. But it does kind of open up the opportunity to meet new people in your field through these different specialty groups and things like that. And then in both professional connections and networking, conversations may gradually deepen. They may begin kind of superficially and then expand from there. So don't expect to necessarily start off by talking about real big ideas or anything too big like that. So you don't want to kind of start off a discussion with like, what's the biggest challenge your company is facing right now, or anything sort of like that. You want there to be sort of a slow build, get to know the other person, develop a rapport, and then gradually develop that conversation to deepen and become a bit more meaningful. So now I kind of want to talk about why professional connections are important. So they are important for learning about and potentially pursuing career and professional opportunities. So you can discover opportunities that aren't necessarily advertised anywhere. It's a great way to uncover potential opportunities of interest and for accessing the hidden job market. So if you're not familiar with the idea of the hidden job market, it's the idea that about 50% or even more than that of all jobs aren't actually posted anywhere. They're never advertised or even put on a company's websites. They're only accessible through word of mouth and through referrals. So they become more apparent when you have connections in that industry or talk to people who might be sort of in the know about those different things. So if you're looking for like job or internship opportunities and not engaging your network, you might not be aware of a vast amount of potential possibilities that are out there. So really, when it comes to the job and internship search, I always recommend engaging your network and thinking about the best way that you can further expand your network, and then also kind of reach out and engage that existing network that's in place. And then they're also important for remaining informed and up to date regarding industry news or information. So staying in the know within your specific field. Depending on your major or industry of interest, things may move kind of quickly and information may change rapidly. Professional connections can help ensure that you're sort of up to date, or at least have access to reaching out to people who are in the know and staying on top of these changes as they occur. They are also helpful for establishing professional credibility. So this aspect is so important. It's really important to have the ability for others to sort of vouch for you and for the good work that you do. So that colleagues can sort of speak to your abilities and be able to potentially recommend you or refer you in the future. And so that they can provide an endorsement, and so that you can also do the same for others that you encounter. So if I've worked with a person and had a positive experience, then I'm probably going to be more likely to recommend them for some future possibility or opportunity that exists. So if I hear about a task that involves, say, data analysis skills, and in the past I've worked with Rebecca, who I know has these skills and who I've been able to see has done a great job in this area, then I will be in a position to recommend Rebecca because I've been able to witness her ability to use those skills. So really, professional connections are good for developing that credibility and kind of having other people be able to recommend you or speak to your ability to perform aspects of a position well. And then at times it results in sharing information or resources that can help accomplish a goal. So joining forces, helping others accomplish tasks and make progress on meeting their respective goals. And then finally, to help provide industry-specific advice or answer questions. So this is sort of similar to the bullet I mentioned above, but engaging your professional connections when you have any questions can be really useful and may yield new information or new ideas or answers to, or provide solutions to challenges that you might be facing. So as you can see, there's a lot of great things that can come from establishing a professional network. So let's kind of start talking about the do's and don'ts for developing those connections. So when meeting new people in both in-person and online formats, you can consider these following etiquette guidelines. So do strike up conversation, engage in conversation with the people you encounter, see where it leads. It's not entirely necessary to have some specific goal in mind. You may just want to start off by talking to someone because you are interested in talking with someone. And it's also good to be friendly, be genuine, be yourself. Do demonstrate curiosity and interest in others. So people generally like to make new connections, and people like to talk about things that are important to them. Really show interest and be a good listener, and really try to listen, and you'll hear what other people find important. It really goes back to being kind of genuine, and people can sense when you're truly listening and being authentic, as I'm sure you're aware. So make sure that you're giving people the time of the day, and you're being genuine and listening and interested in what they have to say. And then remain polite, positive, and stick to appropriate topics. So keep topics and opinions positive. You don't want to start off being too overly negative or overly critical about anything, especially as a first impression, because first impressions really are important. So don't ask about anything too personal or ask for private company information or anything like that. Also, don't provide too much overly personal information of your own. So keep the topics professional at first whenever you're making new professional connections. Ask individuals for their business card after meeting them. So get in contact and get their contact information so that you can follow up. Stay in contact however you can. Again, maintaining that professional network is important. And if possible, keep their business card out and handy until you can do something like add them on LinkedIn or send them a follow-up or thank you email or something like that. And it is a good idea to follow up with an email or a thank you note. I spoke earlier about the importance of maintaining those professional connections. It really is helpful to keep those connections organized so that you kind of have them all in one place or know where to access their information. So reply after you meet someone with a note. It doesn't have to be some super long novella or anything else. It can be just concise and to the point. Hey, it was nice meeting you at such and such event. I enjoyed our discussion about this or that. This is my contact information. So if I think about getting in contact with someone in the future, I'm going to be a lot more, if I think about approaching them, I'm going to be a lot more receptive to the idea of just going through my inbox, searching for their name and finding that email and having that contact information there, rather than thinking, oh, where did I put their business card and how can I get in touch with that person that I met at that conference that one time? So really kind of sending that note or adding them on LinkedIn or something like that is a good way to make it easy for them to access your information and get in touch with you in the future. So yeah, you might say, it was great meeting you at this event, and kind of touch on an important aspect or two about that event or that conversation. Add them on LinkedIn. And if you do that, personalize it. Adding some details showing that you were listening and showing that you were paying attention is really, really ideal. And initiating that contact and sending that message, it really just makes it easier for them to respond to you in the future. So really try to open up those communication channels as much as you can and make it as easy as possible for them to get in touch with you. Some don'ts. Do not ask new contacts about job or internship opportunities outright. So that can be kind of considered rude or unprofessional. Think about it as though you were asking someone out on a date. You're probably not going to, when you first meet them, say, hey, can I take you on a date? No, it usually starts off with a conversation, getting to know the other individual and building a foundation for those future opportunities. And then do not express negativity about people or companies. It's really important. Again, it can come back to haunt you, and those first impressions are important. It can kind of show a lack of loyalty, or maybe it will speak to the trustworthiness of the person. But it's not a great first impression to start off talking negatively. So think about from their perspective. If you're saying this about someone else, what are you saying about them? So try to keep conversations positive and subjects positive, at least initially at first, certainly. And then you never know who knows who. So maybe they're friends with someone that you are referencing with those negative thoughts. So again, try to stay positive and not express negativity, especially at first. And then do not appear disinterested or as though you're not paying attention. So have you ever been in a situation where you met someone and it was clear that they were not fully engaged or paying attention? They were maybe looking around over your shoulder at other people in the room or things like that, it probably didn't feel good. And so it's really important not to be that person and to make someone else feel that way. So if you're talking to someone, maintain that eye contact, show that you're paying attention, you're listening, you know, be aware of your body language. Again, these are more in-person than virtual formats, but it does kind of speak to virtual as well. And I'll touch on some other aspects that are helpful with virtual meetings and body language in the future. But yeah, look at your nonverbals. You're nodding, arms not crossed, eye contact is good. Express interest in what they're saying. And if someone's talking, pay attention. It's just kind of that common courtesy too. So also, do not send generic introduction emails or LinkedIn requests. Try to personalize them if possible. Include specific information. If you're reaching out to an alumnus, mention that you have that school connection. If you're interested in a certain company or career, mention sort of where your interest area lies or how that's applicable. And if you met them at an event already, mention which event and maybe something that you talked about. And then finally, don't get discouraged. So developing new connections and networking in and of itself is a skill. So just like anything else, the more you practice it, the more comfortable you get with it. And just remember to be yourself and let it come naturally. So now I want to kind of focus on developing those connections in person. Again, I'll split it up into in-person and then virtual. So I'll start with this in-person format. But remain aware of opportunities to establish connections and plan ahead to engage in them. So try to be as prepared as possible and always be on the lookout for new opportunities. Look into professional organizations or university events to see where those future opportunities are happening to potentially expand your network. Examples of some common opportunities, professional conferences or trade association meetings. So explore professional associations within your field. They often involve designated networking times or events or opportunities for you to get to know other individuals within that certain industry. And this extends to virtual conferences too. I know I've personally attended since March several conferences that have been taking place within a virtual format. And there's always been an opportunity to get to know other people or reach out and make new connections or connect with individuals one-on-one. So those are sort of built into many professional association meetings and things like that. So I really can't stress the importance enough of looking at professional association and organization meetings or conferences or things like that within your field. So if you're not sure what professional associations you might want to be looking into, there's a link here, and I know we'll share this Spark page with you all in the future, so you can take a look at that. It's also on the Career Planning and Development Center's website, so you can take a look at some different professional associations. I'll just go ahead and click on it now and just kind of show you a few of how it's organized in terms of schools and colleges. And again, this is not a comprehensive list by any means. There are a ton of professional organizations and associations. I, a while ago, came across a National Frozen Pizza Association professional organization, which they can get so specific that there's, I'm sure no matter what you're interested in, there's some group of individuals who are interested in a professional way at the same level. So there's always good ways to get involved and learn more and make connections within those professional organizations. So I'd recommend taking a look at this. And yeah, so be on the lookout for those opportunities. There are a lot of organizations, so do some research and you might want to talk to other people, maybe instructors or other people you know in that field, and find out what are some professional associations that you would recommend. Getting that information from people who are already invested in that industry and in that field could be very, very insightful and very useful. And then academic club meetings or events. So on-campus clubs and special events and things like that, there's always an opportunity to meet new people here on campus, or at least here at the university. And then visiting with members of social clubs or religious groups. So things like Rotary Club, Lions Club, any sort of professional social clubs or groups or like community organizations, things like that. Talking to neighbors and community members. So a lot of informal opportunities that exist through community involvement, whether they're like neighborhood meetings or things like that. So there's always opportunities to expand your professional network, even if it's not necessarily directly aligned with your ideal field or a field that you're looking at entering. Adding to your kind of collection of professional networks and contacts is useful. And then alumni events. So there are a lot of in-person meetings and events throughout the year. Obviously this year is a little bit different, but in the future, that would be something to look into. You can also access the online alumni community as well. And then talking with classmates. So a lot of classmates are likely in a similar situation as yourself and have similar professional interests. So remaining engaged and in contact with them both now and in the future is a good idea. And then career and internship fairs. So it's a chance to speak with recruiters or employer reps, as well as other attendees. So the Walker School of Business and Technology, there's a internship fair coming up, I think in February. The School of Communications Internship Expo was last week, and Media Academy is coming up in the spring. So these are types of events where you might kind of think about developing some connections through those. You can also explore and register for different CPDC and other professional development related events that our office might be doing via Handshake. And then, so I also wanted to kind of touch on, prior to attending any potential networking events, it's really important to have an idea of what you want to say when you first meet someone. So an introduction can involve kind of a brief, thoughtful message about your academic and professional self that includes who you are. So a brief professional background, what and where you're studying. Also, what skills and experiences you possess. So what relevant skills have you developed? What kind of experiences have you had? Have you maybe completed some internships or have full or part-time jobs or any notable academic projects? Any sort of co-curricular activities or club or organizational involvement. These may be things you want to touch on in your sort of elevator pitch or networking pitch. And then it's also good to talk about your goals. So what are you sort of looking towards? How does, this meeting, when you're meeting them, fit in towards, what you're looking to do in the future? So you can kind of take a look at this Elevating Your Networking Pitch guide, but there's also this resource on the Career Planning and Development Center's website that really goes into how to sort of develop that networking pitch, and what it has example pitches and includes sort of strategies for creating one and what you might want to talk about or what you might want to include within that. So it is really good to kind of have an idea of what you want to say before you meet someone, so that you can kind of create that clear, concise expression of who you are as a professional, and so that they can kind of get that contextual information about that initial meeting. Sort of along those lines, it's good to have a resume or professional portfolio sort of at the ready and up to date. So if you know that you're going to be engaging in some opportunity for networking, it's not a bad idea to have a resume on hand that has, kind of depending on the situation, it could have more information about sort of what you've been up to and sort of a synopsis of your skills, your experiences, your professional background. So it can kind of also serve as a tangible object that if you distribute it or present it to someone, they can kind of take that away sort of in lieu of a business card. So that is something to kind of think about as well. And then for more information about kind of crafting an effective resume, you can explore this resource, which is our guidelines for cover letter writing resource. A lot of good information here. We have kind of tips and tricks for creating your resume, some general strategies for building it, a lot of good information. And then towards the bottom, we have some example resumes that you might want to take a look at if you're unsure how to kind of go about creating your own, or to get some ideas of different ways to express information. So I would recommend taking a look at that if you have any questions or desires in terms of creating application materials. And you can also, I would recommend, meet with your career advisor. We are here to help with all sorts of application material development. So you can have a customized resume through meeting with your career advisor and having that experience where we work with you to kind of make sure you're expressing your skills and experiences in the best way possible. And then, so another way to develop in-person connections is to simply initiate conversations with others. So it might not come naturally, but it's a skill that you can kind of develop. Continue to practice just striking up conversations with others within professional realms. Practice introducing yourself. It may sound a little weird, but try recording yourself or speaking into a mirror and see what you would take away from that if you were on the other side of that conversation. And have an idea of what you want to say, kind of develop that elevator pitch or that brief synopsis of who you are as a professional so that you kind of have an idea of what you want to say when you first get to know someone. And then explore connections that are already in place. So you may already know people who it would be helpful to talk to or learn from. I would recommend using this graphic organizer to kind of explore existing connections that might already exist. Let's say you're interested in learning more about a certain career field and you'd like to develop more of a network in that specific area. You can kind of think of yourself in the middle and work your way out and think about different people you might know or people who might know people who would be able to provide more insight or more information or might be helpful in some way in terms of getting you towards that goal. So I would really encourage you to spend a couple minutes and brainstorm. Use this as a way to kind of think of those individuals that might be helpful within your professional future. And consider yourself in the middle and just kind of work your way out. So think about former employers, kind of create a list. From their past colleagues, former supervisors, just kind of go through and use this as a tool to explore. Maybe you already know some people in career fields that have useful information or might be able to kind of help you along the way. All right, so that's kind of it for the in-person aspect. Again, in the future, they might be more applicable, but I think it's good information to have kind of before we engage in those or have the opportunity to. Now I want to talk about developing those professional connections virtually. So clearly, COVID-19 has changed the way we traditionally develop these connections and has kind of ushered in the need to adapt effectively. While this response to the changing circumstances has presented challenges, certainly it has also created new opportunities for developing connections using virtual formats as well. So in a way, it has created more efficient access to some of these opportunities. People are generally a bit more receptive in meeting in online formats, and things like professional conferences don't really present as much of a challenge with regard to travel arrangements and the time needed to attend in person. A lot of times there are discounted events and you don't necessarily have to travel to different cities to take part in some of these conferences or professional opportunities. So now there exists a greater emphasis and importance in utilizing methods to connect with others within this virtual digital format. A strategy that has become more salient in this new environment involves utilizing career management and social networking platforms like Handshake and LinkedIn to really kind of develop and maintain professional connections. So Handshake you can use to explore different students who are maybe in the same institution, so maybe other Webster students, but other students from other universities as well. You can get more information and kind of look at who you might want to connect with based on shared interests or shared sort of profiles. You can, so this is kind of what that would look like, but then I can also show you how to kind of access that from your Handshake profile. So if you were to log into Handshake, it would look something like this. If you go to students, you will be presented with all of these different students and all of these different filters if my computer loads. Okay, there we go. So you can type in and sort by name or school. So if you want to look at Webster, excuse me, students only, or alumni as well. You can sort by school years, majors, previous employers, student organizations. So you can use this information to find students who might have similar interests or might be worth reaching out to, and might be someone you want to connect with professionally. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at Handshake, because I think a lot of times people aren't aware that Handshake has that opportunity or that ability to make those connections. There's also LinkedIn, which is kind of the forerunner in terms of professional social networking platforms, a very powerful professional networking tool. I will kind of show you what that looks like. Whether you have a LinkedIn profile already or not, I would recommend taking another look at using LinkedIn and developing connections that way. And then there's an aspect of LinkedIn that I really want to touch on in just a second. And that's the kind of Webster University LinkedIn alumni section or feature. That is something that is really invaluable and provides a lot of good information. One way to kind of use that is through informational interviewing. And if you're not sure what informational interviewing is, essentially it's the idea of identifying someone who's working in a career field or at an employer or in a role that's of interest to you, and seeing if you can ask them some questions. You might ask them, how they got started, what they do day in and day out, what they would recommend for someone first getting started in that field. Really, it's an opportunity to gather information and do some kind of fact finding and get the specific insight from someone working within that field. So the Career Planning and Development Center has this informational interviewing resource that has a lot of good information, as well as kind of tips for getting started, some different ways you can identify people with whom to hold an informational interview. And what it does is it does two things, really. It gets you that very specific insight from someone who's working in that field, but it also creates a new contact within a field who wasn't there before. And from there, a lot of times that may have sort of a snowball effect. So maybe you reach out to someone who's working in a career field that is of interest to you. You talk to them, kind of express your interest in what you're hoping to do in that field, and they kind of tell you a little bit about what they do, but maybe they say, well, that's not exactly what I do, but I have a friend or I have a colleague who does. And why don't I give you their information and you can talk to them? So it kind of creates a snowball effect where you may create more people to kind of add to your professional network who weren't there before. And so it's a really helpful way to develop new connections. And I think it's oftentimes underutilized, but really, really effective. This guide also has like some different templates or frameworks for how you might want to request an informational interview, because it may be somewhat uncomfortable, or you might not necessarily know exactly how to broach that subject with more or less a perfect stranger. But this is helpful for kind of getting an idea of how you might want to frame that ask and frame that discussion. I think you'll be surprised at how willing people will be to take some time out of their day and speak with someone who's shown an interest in their field and wants to learn more about what they do. Oftentimes, especially Webster alumni are very, very receptive to that and very helpful and are happy to talk to people. So I really recommend taking advantage of that. There's also like a sample email or a sample LinkedIn request, things like that. And then some potential questions that you might want to ask someone if you were to hold an informational interview with them. So how you got started in this field, what previous jobs led you to this current position. These are some different things you can kind of think about to get that information on top of the specific questions that you might already have and might be thinking about asking. And so how that all fits in is, I mentioned the Webster University LinkedIn alumni page. This is a great way to identify people with whom you might want to hold informational interviews and kind of get some of that specialized information. So if you go to Webster University's LinkedIn page and then go to alumni, it'll bring up 96,000 Webster University alumni who are currently on LinkedIn. So depending on what you want to know or what kind of industry you're interested in or what role or position, you can use this search box or these pre-existing filters to kind of go through and sort and find people you might want to connect with. So they all kind of appear down here. Maybe you're interested in being, say, a paralegal. So maybe you want to talk to someone who is currently working as a paralegal or has that experience. If you use that and search for that, it narrows that 96,000 down to 1,300. So now we're getting a little bit closer. They all show up down here, so you can see all these different people who work as paralegals already. Say you want to limit it to just the St. Louis area, or you want to get a feel for where people who work as paralegals in the St. Louis area who are Webster University alumni typically work. If you select that filter, you will see only those individuals, and you will see the different places that they currently are employed, currently or have been in the past. So you can kind of select these to narrow it down to very certain individuals in very specific fields. So say there's a private firm that you're interested in learning more about that or that company or working in that realm. This would be a way to develop a connection and potentially reach out to someone who, you've already got that Webster connection. So when you reach out, you can mention that, and that is oftentimes something that will be notable for them, and they might be more receptive to having a discussion with you and answering some of your questions via phone call or video conference or whatever it might be. So I'd really recommend taking a look at that. You can also sort by what they do. So if you wanted to get into even more specific areas within that paralegal realm, you can use that. You can sort by what they studied, what they say they're skilled at, and also how you're connected. So you can use all of these filters and the search box to narrow it down to some pretty specific individuals with whom you may want to connect. So this is a really good resource for developing those connections and building your network. So yeah, that is what we kind of explored just a moment ago. If you are holding an informational interview, or if you're just connecting with someone in general, like at a conference or something like that within a virtual format, there are some specific considerations that I would keep in mind. Be aware of your visual surroundings. So you want to think about your background, you want to think about your lighting, you want to make sure that what they see on their end looks professional, looks clean, looks organized, professional, good to go, that you're sending a message that you are that professional. Also, if you schedule a time to meet with someone virtually, check your technology ahead of time. Make sure, people are because we're all in this situation, I think everyone's a bit flexible with technology mishaps, but if at all possible, avoiding those and checking your technology before you meet is ideal. Again, maintaining that level of professionalism, dress professionally, make sure that what you're wearing kind of sends a positive message about you as an individual and you as a professional. And then be punctual and be on time. So really, this is just a good practice to kind of show respect for that person's time. If you are arriving and set something up and plan to arrive a couple minutes early maybe, because being on time really is important. You don't necessarily want to ask someone for like an informational interview or something like that, and then kind of leave them waiting for a few minutes. So definitely be on time. And then if you're meeting in that virtual format, speak clearly, maintain professionalism. I've said maintain professionalism many times, but that's just really one of those aspects that I think is important to take to heart and really consider. So other actions you can use to build or other opportunities to build connections. Get involved with on-campus clubs or activities. There are so many different clubs or organizations here at Webster that you can attend via virtually or in person when the time allows for that. So you can sort based on just keywords or alphabetically. So again, sort of like professional associations, organizations here on campus get pretty specific too. Things like Anime Club or I think Hiking Club is still in existence. There are some different ways that you can kind of develop those connections with other classmates who have shared interests, and they might be important people to kind of call upon throughout your professional journey. So you never really know where everyone's going to end up. So kind of maintaining those connections now and building those foundations with other people is a really good idea. There's also mentorship opportunities that exist, especially, for Walker School of Business and Technology students specifically. The Regional Business Council has the mentor network. So that's a way that you can meet someone who's already established in their field, and they can serve as a mentor and answer any questions you have and kind of help guide your decision making if that's something that would be of interest to you. And they can also have the opportunity to introduce you to other people if that sort of comes about. So mentorships are really, really important too. It's a good way to both establish that professional credibility, get that specific information, and get that guidance from someone who's currently working in that field. So that's just one way to go about doing that. As we kind of talked about before, professional associations are a great idea. Definitely take advantage of professional associations. This doesn't really apply this semester, but our office actually does something called the Professional Association Membership Program, where if you complete a brief application, you may have the opportunity for our office to sponsor your membership fees for a student membership to a professional association. So be on the lookout for that for spring. I know that the fall semester has already closed and those people have been awarded already. So if that's something that interests you in the future, keep an eye out for in your inbox, because we will certainly be informing you of those opportunities coming up, but also, feel free to reach out to your career advisor. And then there are other experiential learning opportunities. So whether that's through volunteer experiences or working in the community or full or part-time jobs or internships or job shadowing, there are ways to develop connections to with other people in different fields. So just kind of try to think about it broadly and think about all the different aspects of your life that you might want to explore to learn more about potential opportunities for making those connections. So moving on and developing that action plan, it's helpful to prepare and practice that introduction or elevator pitch. That information includes kind of who you are, what skills and experiences you possess, and your professional goals. That way, when you do meet someone for the first time, you sort of have an idea of aspects you already want to touch on. And then I would consider looking into professional social networking platforms like LinkedIn, or exploring the student section of Handshake as a way to kind of develop and maintain some professional connections. And then identify existing contacts that you may already have using that graphic organizer that I showed you. So really spending a few minutes and kind of sitting down and brainstorming people who might be worth reaching out to or might hold information or ideas that would be of value to you in your career journey would be helpful. And then explore opportunities for informational interviews and strategies for developing professional connections, both virtually and in person. So we covered kind of both aspects today. Obviously, virtual might be a bit more salient in the near future, but really kind of consider ahead of time what opportunities there are. There are likely many opportunities for you to develop new professional connections and develop your network. And so definitely take advantage of those opportunities. And then finally, connect with your career advisor. We are here to help you. We can help you develop a plan and look at additional opportunities based on your specific areas of interest or your specific field for developing that professional network. We can help in a number of different ways. It's not just in that area. Pretty much anything pertaining to your professional or career growth, you can meet with your career advisor for. We can kind of develop a plan moving forward. So I definitely encourage doing that. And that is pretty much what I've got prepared for everyone today. At this point, I would love to answer whatever questions anyone has or provide some clarity if you have any questions.
Feel free to type your questions into the chat. You can adjust the settings so that you're sending that message to everyone in the chat, or you can send it specifically to me, and I'll make sure that that gets to John. So really, however you want to do that. While you are, processing your questions, I did want to ask your assistance because we just want to make sure that we're doing our jobs and relaying the information to you that we are supposed to. So we have just 4 questions for you to answer. So I'm going to launch that poll and give you like a couple of minutes to work through those questions as well. So their poll is launched. While you all are looking at that and typing your questions into the chat, John, a lot of people out there are, nervous about networking, about small talk, or they kind of identify as having introverted preferences. What would you recommend to kind of help ease those nerves for people who are just, uncomfortable with even the prospect of reaching out or talking to a classmate or something like that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because that is something that, depending on your personality, you maybe aren't naturally someone who likes to kind of jump into the conversation and introduce yourself. I will say it is helpful to kind of start small. So start with friends and maybe classmates and kind of work your way out. You don't necessarily have to jump right into an informational interview and introduce yourself to someone you've never met before. So I would say start small and get a bit more comfortable with introducing yourself, and really going back to sort of that networking pitch, that elevator pitch. Having an idea of what you'd like to say can really help kind of grease the wheels of that conversation. So giving someone you're meeting for the first time that understanding of different aspects about yourself can kind of help the conversation naturally develop a bit more. And to a degree, it may be uncomfortable. And that is one of those things that the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get at it. So there's no way to, or at least not one that I know of, where you can completely eliminate that level of discomfort. For a little bit, it may be a bit outside your comfort zone, but I think the more you do it, again, the easier it becomes in the future, and the more confident you will feel. If you're unsure about how you kind of want to first introduce yourself or things like that, I mentioned the idea of like recording yourself or speaking in a mirror or practicing with a friend. These things can, the more you do those and the more you prepare, the more comfortable you're going to feel when you first introduce yourself to someone new. So those are some strategies I would recommend. Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything else you would want to add or include that you've considered.
It depends on the situation. Obviously, for like an informational interview, you have prepared questions. So I like to do the same type of thing for like a group event, which obviously isn't taking place now, but in the future, if you have like the opportunity to attend a conference or a networking event of some sort, I usually have like a couple of questions just always loaded in the back of my mind that I could ask someone to prompt conversation, because I'm like not a natural small talker. So I just kind of like to have just a few things to fall back on if that conversation seems to be lagging and you get into that like awkward part. So that's maybe another recommendation that I would have, but I think you covered, being prepared and practicing, and it gets easier over time. That's great advice.
I think that actually got me thinking and gave me another idea of if you are attending these, like an event or something like that, and you are with someone who maybe has more extroverted preferences or is more prone to developing those connections. I mean, that's a method I've used. I personally myself have more introverted preferences, so it is a bit unnatural for me to initiate conversations. But fortunately, I have a former coworker who is very extroverted, and so if I were to attend events with them, I would sort of let them kind of make those introductions or kind of bridge that gap, so that it's easier to kind of ease your way in. So go with other friends if you're not sure. It's might be a lot easier than going alone and by yourself. If there's someone else that has similar interests that you already know, go together, and that's a great way to feel a bit more comfortable and a bit more confident.
I have really, though, found the experience that you talked about, which is that people are often really willing to be helpful. I have found that myself. I did an informational interview where I took a class and I'd asked the professor who ran a small business as his primary job, if I could, do an informational interview with him about that job. And he brought me in and like introduced me to all these other people at his place of work. And so it was a great experience that I was not expecting. I was just planning on talking to him. So you might be surprised at how helpful people want to be, and like how much more you get out of those kinds of one-on-one experiences than you expect. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
I have one.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
So, of course, you want to use like networking and connections you have to try to get your foot in the door with some kind of opportunity or job. But how do you come off as like not necessarily asking for it, but still letting them know that you're interested in it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you do want to be genuine, but you don't want to appear as though you're expecting something other than maybe just information. So I think just showing an eagerness in learning more, maybe doing some research about different aspects of that organization or that company that you're interested in, and asking some specific questions that show that you've done your homework on them. You kind of know a little bit about that. Maybe there's a new program or a new initiative or something something newsworthy, or something that shows that you've really taken the time and are just really looking at getting that information about that company or that role, whatever that might be. I think that is one way to do it. But a lot of the sort of using your network to learn about different opportunities that kind of has to happen a bit more gradually. That has to happen maybe over time. Sometimes the timing is right, and you're just, as luck may have it, there's a position opening or there's an internship opening that they're aware of when you first talk to them. That's not always the case. Sometimes that takes a little bit of kind of getting on that employer or that person's radar and sort of being there and maintaining that contact. So I would exercise patience and just kind of make sure that you are really showing that you're genuine and earnest and really interested in that company or that person or that aspect of it. And, hopefully the opportunity side of it will kind of naturally develop alongside that. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, again, I want to thank John for the knowledge he shared with us today. As I mentioned at the beginning of our session, you'll be receiving an email with the presentation materials, so you can get to all of those links that John showed you, as well as information about how to connect with the Career Planning and Development Center for individual assistance, and a recording link to the webinar today. Our next web event will be the final installment of our Diversity in the Workforce Choose Your Own Journey partnership series with the Multicultural Center and International Student Affairs Office. And that's going to take place tomorrow, November 19th at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. And so that's going to focus on how socioeconomics impact career and workplace choices. So if you have an interest in learning more about that session or registering, you can find the details in your Handshake account. And we're looking forward to sharing that content with you. So with that, thank you very much for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.